Each year in the United States, thousands of major crimes go unsolved. When the case has gone cold and police have nowhere to turn, they seek assistance from the public. This is a program dedicated to solving these cases. This is Crime Stoppers Case Files.
Like most urban areas, Chicago and its surrounding cities have had a number of unsolved crimes. Crimes that the public may be able to help solve. I'm Lisette, and this is Crime Stoppers Case Files. The purpose of this program is to shine a light on unsolved cases in an effort to get you, the public, involved. If you know anything about any of the cases you see today, call Cook County Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous and be eligible for a cash reward. Now, let's get right to work.
In the early evening hours of February 2nd, 2013, Iraq War veteran Willie Cook was gunned down as he sat innocently in his car with his 2-year-old son. With a war hero senselessly killed and a small child wounded, East Chicago detectives are pleading for your help. Here's his story.
Willie he was a good man. He was a great father. He loved his children. Obviously, we were together for 4 years. Actually, our 4-year anniversary was February 7th. I mean, we had, the ups and downs that any relationship would have, but we loved each other, and he loved us, and he took care of us. We were his #1 priority. The day that we met, I met him at my job. I was working at a grocery store as a cashier, and I was closing my line, and he walked in my line, and my manager was actually standing next to me, and he was like, "You ain't see her just take that $20 out the register?" And then we started laughing, and he was telling me about my smile, and he had the prettiest smile, the brightest smile ever. And it started from there, and from that day, we were like best friends. The day we found out we were having a boy, because I had a boy already and he had a daughter. So, of course, this is his boy, his little him, so he was very excited about that. I had a lot of complications through my pregnancy, so, and he was there every step of the way. Even the day he rushed me to the hospital because I was just in so much pain, and they ended up doing an emergency C-section, and he was there every day, all day. He was right there. Even when we went home and Antoine had to stay in the hospital, he was at the hospital every day, going to see him, checking on him, calling, everything. It was good. It was like we finally had our own little family. It was us and then the 3 kids. Because he took in my other son that was not by him, that really made me love him even more, because he didn't have to, and some people don't, and he did. And he treated my son like he was his own.
Willie was a man. And it's good to be around someone and watch him grow. And I think at the time when him and my daughter got together, because, they were together for 4 years, I could actually see that. And I really didn't want him to go to Afghanistan. I really didn't. But he said, "Mom, I have to do my duty."
Willie was in the National Guard. He actually joined in January of 2009, and we met in February of 2009. So he had just signed up. And, at the beginning, it was supposed to just be like a friendship. Oh, well, we're just gonna be friends. Like, let's just do that, because we both had hectic lives, I guess, if you wanna say that. But of course, that led to a relationship, and because at that time, now I know he was enlisted in the military, I didn't really like it, especially when I found out he was going to Afghanistan. He had to go, and by that time, I was pregnant with Antoine, so it was even harder, because of course I didn't want him to go, knowing that he was gonna have to be away for a year, and just knowing what can happen out there, it scared me to death. But we talked every day. We Skyped. He Skyped us, me and the kids. I was just glad that day in September when he came home. When he finally made it home, that was like one of the best days in my life. Especially after having 6 of his battle buddies killed, it felt good to have him be able to come back home.
On February the 2nd, 2013, around 5 to 6 p.m., victim Willie Cook Jr., he went to go pick up his son from his fiancée. And as he pulled up to this address at his grandmother's house, was shot and killed. We're looking for help. Willie Cook Jr. not only was a dedicated father, but also a dedicated soldier in the Army and the National Guards. He was recognized so much by the Army and the National Guards that they promoted him up to sergeant. On February 2nd, 2013, Willie Cook Jr., he went to go pick up his son from his fiancée.
He was gonna come get Antoine for me, so I told him, you could just meet me at my mom's house. He came over, he talked to my mom, he got Antoine. We both left out at the same time, but we were in 2 separate cars. I went one way, he went the other way, but we were both actually coming to East Chicago. He, was telling me that he was gonna take Antoine to see his mother and his grandmother. So actually, while we were driving, we were talking too on the phone. By the time I made it home, we were still talking, and then we started texting. And he texted me at 4:55 that day. I didn't respond until like 5:03, and I never got a response back.
And as he pulled up to this address at his grandmother's house, at that time he was in the vehicle with his 2-year-old son, which was in the car seat, right in the back of him. He was, by my understanding, talking on the phone to unknown suspects. Came up to the car while Willie Jr. and his son innocently was sitting inside the vehicle. The unknown suspects shot and killed Willie Cook Jr. and injured his son. They ran off in the dark, and right now we're just trying to see if we can pull this case together and see if we can find who did this to Willie Cook Jr.
His sister called, and she was kind of hysterical, and she was like, have you talked to my brother? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna call you back. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so I started calling his phone back to back to back to back, and I wasn't getting an answer, so I called her back. I didn't get an answer. By that time, I was already getting in my car to go towards his grandmother's house. By the time I got to my car, his sister had called me back, and she was crying, and she was basically just telling me what happened. And at that time, I was thinking, I asked her, like, where's Antoine? And she was like, Antoine was with him. By that time I started driving. I was almost at his grandmother's house, and that's when I saw all the lights and everything flash, and it started to kick in, like, but it still didn't. And so they had the whole block parked off, and I pulled up and I got out my car. I ran down the block. I went through the tape and everything that the police had up. And they stopped me like, who are you? Where are you going? And I'm like, my son. I'm like, that's Will's car. And my son was in the car with him. Like, he had my son. And the police didn't even know at that time that Antoine was even with him, because someone had took Antoine out the car and already took him to the hospital. Someone drove me to the hospital, and I went to the back, and Antoine was back there, and he was screaming and hollering and everything, because by that time I didn't know that he had gotten shot too until I went back, and they were just taking his pants off, and that's when they saw all the blood and everything, because the detectives and everything were back there. And I asked, I just kept asking, well, where is Will? Where is Will? Because hearing from somebody that he's gone, it's like, okay, no, I don't think so. So that's why I asked them, and then they were telling me that he didn't make it. That's pretty much how I found out. It's like I had to kind of stay strong because I was there with my son, and I didn't want him to be even more scared than he already was, because he was only 2 and he didn't know what was going on. It was hard. It was just hard.
On February 2nd, 2013, an American hero, not to only our country, but to his family, was gunned down an unmistaken identity, and we do need your help.
It upsets me because he was a good person. He was a young person with a promising future. He came home just ready to do what he had to do, as a father, as a fiance, as a son-in-law, and a son. And for someone to have just snatched that away from him on something senseless. I know the first thing when those bullets started hitting the car, I know the first thing he said or thought was, my son. I know it. That's probably what ended his life, to save his son's life. Antoine is 2 years old. He was gone for a year, so he really had no time with his dad. He really didn't. I really want them to get justice because they did not deserve this. They really didn't. They didn't deserve this at all.
He went to war for a whole year, and came back without a scratch. And not even 6 months later, for him to be taken away and like that, that's not fair. And then to do that right in front of his 2-year-old son, and to also injure his 2-year-old son. It's not fair. It wasn't fair to either one.
The city of East Chicago, the family of Willie Cook Jr., and the National Guard, Army, we're not going to let this case go by easily. When Willie Cook Jr. was gunned down, it brought a community together. It made people want to get out and pay attention to what's going on in our city. So we're not going to let this one go by. We're going to hunt down these individuals. We're going to find these individuals, and we're going to bring Willie Cook Jr. case to justice. We have the whole city looking in on this. The whole city will be involved on this, and we will bring these people to justice. We will not stop until we find who did this to Willie Cook Jr.'s case.
My daughter and Willie had another child, Destiny. Her mother put money together to offer a reward for anyone that will come forward with information concerning this crime, so they could be apprehended and arrested and convicted. I'm asking the community, people that are out there that may know something, if you would just speak up for such a promising person and a 2-year-old child. Who does that? So I'm pleading with you. If you know anything, please help the East Chicago, Indiana Police solve this because they deserve justice.
It's like you losing the person that you planned on spending the rest of your life with, and then to have to try to explain to your 2-year-old child why his dad is not here, what that scar is on his leg, what happened for your 2-year-old son. to have to pretend to talk to his dad on the phone, for him to tell you that his daddy is in the car, it's hard. And it's hard to even have to try to explain because, of course, he doesn't really understand. So just put yourself in my place, the family's place, because we lost a father, a friend, a great family man, and we just want someone to say something, and we just need you to come forward. And any information, any little information that you think you may have, that you may know, that you may have heard, anything can help. And that's what we need, and that's what I'm begging for, because we need closure. And Willie and Antoine need justice.
At this time, we don't have any information, any descriptions of any suspects. Only thing that we have that we do know that is possibly 2 suspects that struck Willie Cook Jr. down at this time.
On April 23, 1992, Evanston, Illinois detectives found Deeondra Dawson, a mother of 1, lying in a pool of blood. She had been viciously murdered. The monster who committed this heinous act did it all in front of Deeondra's 4-year-old son. Here's his story.
On April 23, 1992, Evanston police responded about 11 a.m. to Sherman, where they located Deeondra Dawson, who was fatally stabbed. In the apartment was her 4-year-old son, Maurice, and the caller was her Maurice's father, Charles Frazier. It was later learned that through the overnight hours, Deeondra had a unknown visitor to her apartment. An argument ensued, and she was stabbed multiple times. Deeondra was reported by Maurice at the time with the boyfriend. Maurice was in his bedroom. At some point there was a pretty major struggle throughout the apartment. The killer stabbed her multiple times, and she sustained some deep cuts that obviously were deadly. There was blood throughout the apartment, and honestly, one of the wounds she suffered was probably fatal immediately. We know that it was a multi-unit building, that there was noises that people have probably heard, and the killer ended up leaving the apartment out the front door. From what we had learned, Maurice was a witness to this. He was there all night. Again, he was 4 years old. Apparently he laid with the body of his mother all night. At one point attempted to clean up the scene, and actually may have left the apartment to go knock on a friend's door, returned when he was unable to raise anybody at the residence, which was in the same building. And then the next morning when his father came to check on him or called, he asked where his mom was, and he said that she was dead upstairs, at which time Charles, the father, ended up calling 911. There was no signs of forced entry. In reviewing the reports, it looks like that Deeondra knew her killer and actually had let the killer into the residence, and Maurice had referred to the killer as mommy's boyfriend. According to Maurice, it's a male black suspect, and everybody who was identified initially, Maurice was shown pictures of, and he stated that that was not the subject who was over. A suspect is yet to be generated that has turned out to be viable, so we're asking the community for any information. It was in the overnight hours, so I don't know who was out and about, but there's a good chance that somebody saw something, and we're just asking for the community's help. I know this case is 20 years old, but we would love to bring justice to the family.
Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Crime Stoppers Case Files. Remember, we are here every week with more crimes and more families needing answers. These are your neighbors, this is your community, and you can make a difference.